What's up, guys? It is that time of the year where you're either in the middle of lipless season or lipless season is about to start. And there's a gazillion different lipless on the market. We talk about a lot of them here in the shop. Today, we're going to do a deep dive on a relative newcomer to most of you and a relative newcomer here in the US. And this is a product made by Raid Japan called the Level Vibe. Now, this is a lipless that internally here in-house we've been using, we've been crushing fish on. We just want to share some input, share our experiences, and we're going to deep dive and talk about this. So, might be worth paying attention. Maybe you add it to your list, and maybe you catch some more fish on lipless this spring. So, if you'd like to join the convo, let's go. Welcome to the Hookup Tackle. The Hookup Tackle is the world's largest showcase of Megabass products, featuring baits and colors not found at any other dealer. The Hookup also offers a wide display of OSP, Evergreen, Depths, Lucky Craft, Jackal, and many more. The Hookup Tackle is owned and operated by family, is staffed by guides and verified tackle nerds who love helping anglers elevate their craft. If you're in the Phoenix area, we'd love to have you stop by our showroom and check out the wonderful world of Megabass and the Hookup for yourself. If you shop online, there are almost 10,000 SKUs of Megabass products alone, with hundreds of other companies and new products being added daily. So next time you're looking for that hard-to-find bait, that color your fish have never seen before, or maybe you just want to elevate your game, look at thehookuptackle.com. Welcome back, my friends. I am Ben with the Hookup Tackle, the Tackle Otaku on Instagram, being joined once again by my buddy CJ. What's up, Desert Bastard?
How are we doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
We're talking about one of your favorite topics.
Yes.
Lipless. I feel like I should be filming and you should be sitting here because you love lipless.
I could ramble all day.
What is it about fishing a lipless that makes you happy or that you love to do?
Oh, I mean, the eats, of course. The eats are so violent. And it's like, it's power fishing in kind of a finesse way. It's like throwing like a flat-sided crank, but a little bit more. And typically when you're throwing a lipless, like I love throwing it around grass. Yeah. You know, it's just a fun way to cover a lot of ground and get some cool bites. Yeah.
So let's talk about where we fish a lipless. So, you know, when I think of lipless fishing, I think of aquatic vegetation. I think of grass, right? That's really, for me, like if I'm in the spring and there's grass, I probably have 5 lipless tied on. Yeah. Right? Different sizes, different colors, different things, right? Are you thinking the same way?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's killer for that, for sure.
So the other way I think of lipless is I think of lipless as a dragging bait.
Can be, for sure.
So
Absolutely.
there's a lot of places out here, like we have some, I would call them sandier bottom lakes, like Lake Havasu, some of the Colorado River stuff, you know, where the fish will set up on super rando shit. A cage, like a stick. It might just be like nothing but sand for miles and miles and miles, and there's like a stick or a rock, and you get the lipless down there and you drag it around like a jig, and it just presents something different that, you know, everybody else is dragging a jig or a worm, and all of a sudden you're dragging something that's going, you know, and puffing mud, and they're like, what the hell? and they eat it really good.
Yeah, it's
right?
in their face and it's erratic. I mean, you can snap it off the bottom too and get some other bites that you might not have gotten just dragging a crankbait, you know?
Yeah. Now, you can also just fish a lipless, cast and wind, chuck and wind, fish it like a crankbait, fish it in open water. So, you know, it's a fun bait to play with, like in the fall when the fish get super keyed in on shad and bait fish. A lipless can be really a highly effective bait to throw into boils or fish around some of those fish. And it would be the same in the shad spawn for you guys as well. So if you guys live in areas that don't have sand, don't have grass, but you have, you know, schooling bait, a lipless might be a great option for you as well. So today we are going to talk about a specific lipless. We're going to talk about a bait from Raid Japan called the Level Vibe. Now, you hear us talk a lot about, you know, Lucky Craft LV500. You'll hear us talk about Vibration X Ultra, right? You hear us talk about a lot of the same lipless time and time again. Today we're going to talk about the Level Vibe because it's a relatively new bait in most of all of our arsenals. So it's one that we've put a lot of time to try to really learn the ins and outs of. Collectively as a group here, everybody has had the same experiences. We've all kind of really taken to the bait and found that we're getting bites on this bait fishing behind other anglers that are throwing the more traditional lipless, the LV500, the Vibration X Ultra, things that we traditionally have thrown. Now, we might just be that good, right? Or we can be like, yeah, we're not that good. It's the bait must have something to do with it, which is more my thinking. It's really just kind of a sharing episode. We're just going to share our experiences with you guys, our thoughts, and you know, maybe it's a bait that's worth keeping on your radar. Maybe it's a bait that's worth exploring. If you guys fish areas like what we do, when the lipless bite gets hot, there's going to be 500 boats throwing a lipless through grass beds, ripping it out of grass. So they get used to seeing the same bait very quickly, right? So real quick, let's just break down this bait for you guys and let's talk about it. So here is the Raid Level Vibe, okay? Now, Level Vibe is available in a few different versions. This is the original Level Vibe version. It's 54 millimeters, 3/8 of an ounce. So I would consider this, you know, more on the small side of a lipless bait, right? It's super compact, easy to throw. Now, what makes a Level Vibe is basically two things. Here is your point where you're going to attach your snap, your split ring, you're going to tie on to it, right? When this bait is coming through the water, right, it is swimming just like this. So the back hook is in a perfect horizontal line with your line tie, right? So this is how it's coming through the water. What that does is, instead, where most lipless kind of have a real exaggerated movement or they're sitting a little bit lower and the hooks are kind of dragging, the hooks are both basically sticking out at all times exactly right. So when the fish eat it, your hookup ratio is super high with this guy. And obviously it's fun to get bit. It's fun to feel the bite, but I want to land them. I want to touch them, right? So this is a great bait for that. So the swimming, the horizontal, the keel that this bait has is beautiful. The other thing is, if you guys are ripping and you're lifting and dropping, it's built in a way to where most of the weight is down here in the chin, okay? So it's a great one when it gets in grass. It's gonna be swimming, it gets in grass, you rip it, it tears out, it immediately rights itself back to fall and maintain in that same posture. So whether you're swimming it or it's sinking in the same posture. Where most lipless, you're swimming it, it's going like this, then you kill it and it just kind of noses down. This is always maintaining the same shape, whether it's ripped, whether it's dropped, whether it's yo-yoed, whether it's swam. So it's always in the right spot. So no matter where through your cast you get bit, you're ready to set the hook. The hooks are in the right place. And it's not one of those where it looks good, oh, it looks good, and then it hits something, and you yo-yo it, and then it just flops and falls, and oh, that's stupid. It looks good the whole way. If you let it land, it's going to have kind of this perfect little kind of landing spot keel to it as well, so that when it lifts and drops, it's maintaining that same posture. So a lot of thought went into this bait. The 3/8 ounce version, I'm gonna get a little closer to the mic here.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Let me turn this up.
I'm coming into your house.
This is quickly an ASMR lipless episode.
This is one of my favorite lipless baits. Right? That is some nice ASMR. I'm gonna sleep. I'm gonna sleep well.
Someone watching this is way too excited right
now. Yeah. And there's a bunch of people going, "What the fuck just happened?" Okay. This one has a low pitch thump to it and a high pitch glass rattle that you guys can hear if you pay attention to the dual frequency. Right, so you're hearing both that high and the low. Basically, you have to let the fish tell you what they want. Sometimes they want high, sometimes they want low, sometimes they want no sound, sometimes they want lots of sound. But the general thinking is that higher pitch that you hear, that kind of glass speed that's in there, that's going to be more of a similar sound that what like a bait fish or shad is going to make in the winter. Their back is cracking, they're making a lot more sound, they're making a higher pitch sound. That lower thump that you're hearing is going to be similar to the sound of maybe a crawfish scurrying on the bottom. It's more of just a low pitch vibration where they're going to feel on their lateral line. So you're getting kind of that combination of the two things. It's not real loud, right? So when I'm moving it, it's not like a, like the tons of BBs in there. It's subtle, but it's there,
Yep.
right? Now, they also make a silent version in that. So there are times when you don't want it to have any sound. Okay, so they do make a level vibe silent version as well. So same specs, everything is the same except it's a fixed weight system in the chin instead of a shifting weight system. So when you move it, there's absolutely no sound at all. So that's always an option as well. Raid also makes a level vibe big, or level vibe BIG. Now this one is 64 millimeters, 5/8 ounce. Okay, so now you're back to something, I don't know, similar to like an LV500 would be. Those are all in kind of that 5/8 to 3/4 ounce range. Similar size. This one is going to fish and function exactly the same. So on the retrieve, this is the posture it's going to have, right? These hooks are going to be out in the exact right place. This is how it swims. When you rip it out and it falls in that same posture. When it swims, it's that same posture. So it's always maintaining this flight, this keel, this shape. Hooks are in the right place. It's always ready to go. Now, different sound in this guy. Okay, this is, you're gonna hear that one kind of low pitched thump. Okay, but gone is that high glass pitch. So this would be more like a single, like a one knocker type of sound, right? So it's gonna be subtle, right? As it's coming through, and to give you chills.
Yeah, give me chills.
Okay, good. So it's gonna give you just a little bit different sound. It's there, but it's pretty unintrusive, right? It's not super crazy. So again, it's going to give you guys possibly an edge, possibly an advantage when everybody else is throwing a real loud bait like an LV500 or something like that, okay? Now, there's one more bait in the arsenal, and this is actually a lipless blade bait hybrid, but because it's in the level boost family, or the level vibe family, I want to talk about it. So this is the level vibe boost, okay? So it's going to look similar to a blade bait, but it is a lipless that can also be used as a blade bait. And these are available in sizes anywhere from 5 gram to 18 gram. So you can go super small if you guys are fishing really small water. You can go really big if you're fishing deep or heavy. I'll open one up here just to kind of show you. Here's a 14 gram, so half ounce. So this is kind of like in the same realm of what we were talking about. But this also could make a great silent option. So here's a look at the level vibe boost. Okay, so this is going to be a solid bait. Now it's an ABS bait. Okay, it's not like a metal bait like what you'd think of as a traditional blade bait. So it's still an ABS bait. It's internally weighted here. So the same idea. As it swims, it's going to have a tighter motion than, say, the traditional level vibe. It's a thinner bait. It's going to be much tighter, right? But it rips out, it falls really well, and it's going to have that same idea, that same tracking. It's going to come just like this. When you lift and raise, it's going to maintain that same posture up and down. So it's just a really well-built bait, totally silent. Okay, so this would be like going from kind of a wide-bodied square bill to like a flat-side square bill, something more finessey. Okay, so don't be afraid, even though it looks a lot like a blade bait, don't be afraid to throw this as a lipless too, especially when you need it to be more finessey. Now, if they're just chewing it and you're heavy line and heavy rod and ripping and everything, then just go with the regular one. I like the big.
Yeah.
The big is kind of, for me, this is the sweet spot for me. So this would be my day in and day out use lipless. You?
Absolutely. Yep.
This size?
I think I would want to start there and then dissect the bite and then
yeah, and then
down
if I
from there
needed
if I
to
need
downsize, then I can drop down to the level vibe. If you guys are fishing smaller bodies of water, like maybe you're fishing ponds or really shallow water, then I would probably start with just the level vibe and then, go from there. But you got to start somewhere. So for me, this is just kind of a traditional size, this kind of 60 millimeter, 5/8 ounce, really easy to fish around. This is a great size to fish shallow or deep. I can throw this, it's heavy enough that it sink to the bottom, I can drag it around, but it's built well enough to where I can fish it shallow through grass, I can rip it, it's gonna fall, it's gonna have a nice little, I don't want it to be too slow, right? I want it to come through, hit grass, rip it out, and actually fall to where it triggers that strike. this seems to be the magic size. Okay, tons of colors from reds to bluegills. How are you choosing color this time of the year, CJ?
I mean, it's all about the forage, right? And kind of what they're eating. Generally, a lipless is like a bait fish imitation, but it seems like as it gets colder and colder throughout the year, the fish start chewing more up on craws because it's just better in protein, and I think those reds can really stand out. So when I was fishing it recently, it seemed like they definitely wanted that red over that shad pattern.
Yeah.
I mean,
Now
it was like 10 to 1.
we're also kind of in a solid pre-spawn already.
Yep.
Right. So a lot of the country won't even be to where we are until April, May, even June.
Mm-hmm.
You know, red is one of those kind of special kind of pre-spawn spawn trigger colors.
For sure.
So yeah, a lot of you guys may live somewhere where there are no shad. So
Yeah.
throwing shad might not make any sense. Maybe you live where there's gobies or bluegills, so that they make a ton of bluegill patterns. Some great reds. You know, of course, if your water's off colored, you can go with chartreuses or golds. So, you know, you got to pick something, right?
Yep.
Starting point.
Yep.
So I would say for me, a starting point would be something in a, you know, kind of a natural shad or a red. And then if I feel like I'm hitting the right grass and I'm ripping it, I'm not getting bit, then maybe I'll switch to like a bluegill, because bass are funny.
Oh yeah.
They will go from crawdads to shad to bluegill in minutes of time.
Oh yeah.
So you could be going through one little backwater, or a lake, or a cove, or a creek arm, and it's choked with shad, and you're jacking them, and you go back the next week and you're throwing all the same baits. You're like, I know they didn't swim out of here, but you're not seeing shad, you're not seeing the same thing. And maybe the shad left, but the bass stayed because it was chill and they moved to crawdads.
Yeah,
or they moved to
absolutely.
bluegills, or they transitioned to whatever else was around. So sometimes shifting color can make a difference that way as well.
For sure. Could always come down to how you're fishing it too. You know, like
Yeah.
if you're wanting to snap it off the bottom, sometimes it's good to go to a more craw pattern. It looks just like a cross, just jumping right off the
kinda
bottom,
moving.
taking
Yep.
off. Yep.
Yep.
Versus a steady wind like a bait fish would.
Well, let's talk about some retrieves.
Sure.
Okay.
Mhm.
So let's say we're fishing some grass. Okay. There's some grass beds or some clumps or whatever, and we want to get our lipless in. We want to hit the grass. We want to rip it. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think, would you agree that these baits are most effective when they snag in the grass and then they're ripped out,
Absolutely.
versus trying to find the lanes in between the grass and just kind of swimming it down the lane?
100%. 100%. I think having that little second action on that bait can trigger a lot more bites there versus just steady winding it. You can get bit that way for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, it doesn't wander as much as like a crankbait, right? So a crankbait you can kind of get away with reeling more in open water.
Yep.
But that bait is so snappy. If there's a fish there and you rip it out of the grass, I think they're a lot more prone to eat it than maybe like a chatterbait or a crankbait.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a lot more confidence in a lipless than a chatterbait. That's just me. Right? I mean, everybody has their vices, and sometimes they want one more than the other. Sometimes they will only eat a chatterbait,
Right.
or a jackhammer,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, sure.
Sometimes they'll only eat a lipless, right? So sometimes you have to let the fish tell you what they want. Other times, they'll eat anything if it's presented right and ripped correctly. I just find that I get in a really nice groove with a lipless, so I usually try to start here when it's something I'm trying to rip out of grass, but definitely use this bait as something where you're actually trying to snag,
Yep.
if that makes sense, right? So most of the time we're avoiding obstacles. This is one of those where you're throwing around, you're actually trying to get it in the grass so that you can rip it out.
Yep.
And it's that ripping out and then that fall again that's going to trigger a bass that's otherwise just kind of chilling in the grass, not really looking to feed. He's just there,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So use it as a reaction triggering device. Now, let's talk about some setups. Let's talk about rods and reels really quick. Let's talk about reels. Let's break that down really fast. What gear ratio do you prefer on lipless?
I typically like faster gear ratios just because, especially when you're snapping,
Yep.
you need to be able to pick up that line quick.
Yep.
So in that situation, probably an 8, like
Okay.
pretty fast.
Yep.
If I knew I was going to steady wind it, you could probably go into the 7s, but even then I kind of like staying a little faster.
Yeah. So I think a 7 or an 8 is the best, all around. You could certainly go to a 6. Typically, when I drop down to a 6, it's because if I go too fast, the bait has a tendency to like roll or wash out. And lipless don't usually wash out,
Not too
right?
bad, no.
They're usually keeled and weighted in a way to where they can really be burned.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's going to be hard to get this thing to not track. They're rarely going to be doing this kind of stuff. So I would just rather have a high speed so that as I'm fishing and I rip out, if the fish eats it high, I have a high speed to be able to at least pick up that slack really quick and connect.
Yep.
Right? So 8-to-1, preference probably 7-to-1 would be my second option, or 7-to-1 if I just need to kind of be a junk rod to do everything.
Yep.
But
Totally.
8-to-1 is really kind of where I live on lipless. Now, I brought a few different rods here depending on how you fish and which bait you throw. Okay? So let's just break down, since we talked about that this was kind of our starting point, right? So let's talk about this one. Most of the time we're fishing it around aquatic vegetation, grass, we're ripping it out, or dragging it along the bottom. What is your rod of choice?
I mean, probably the heaviest I'd go with is something like the utility player, especially if you're fishing around grass. I think it's important to have a little bit more backbone just to snap it. You'll get a snappier snap,
Yep.
if that makes sense.
Yep.
Dragging along the bottom, you go with something a little bit softer. But to start, I think the utility player with that size lipless is a good start.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a minute. So normally when we talk about baits with treble hooks, we talk about having a rod that really bends and is kind of parabolic, because you want them to get that treble hook and they're almost always hooked kind of jacked up.
Oh, yeah, all the
right?
time.
So you want that rod to give enough to where you're not ripping them out of the face. With lipless, because we have this whole other element of having to rip the bait out, what you guys will find is that if you use a traditional rod, like this is a Valkyrie 7-1 medium heavy, we talk about this rod a lot. If you guys are fishing a lipless in open water and you're just casting it and winding it, this would be the rod I would use. Okay, it's basically a crankbait rod.
Yep.
It's a glass carbon composite. It's soft. It's parabolic. If you're just chucking it and then just doing a straight retrieve, it's beautiful because they're going to load up, you're going to load up, and you're going to land a bunch of fish. But if you try to take one of these lipless and you put some 20-pound or some 65-pound braid or something, and you're throwing it into grass and you're getting into the grass and you're trying to rip it, because this rod is so parabolic, it's not going to rip. It's just going to load. So you're going to get in the grass, you're going to try to rip it and be real snappy, but it's not real snappy. The whole thing gives, and you end up looking like a crazy man because you're going to feel it in the grass, and you literally have to like rip it like 42 feet to get the rod. By the time the rod loads and everything, like it's not a lot of fun to use for that. So if you're actually putting it in the aquatic vegetation, ripping it, something in more of like a traditional, I would say medium heavy, semi-fast action. Right? So more of a traditional, almost jig and worm rod, but you want the rod to have a soft enough give still to where it's still treble hooks. Yep. So when they're hooked, you still need it to give. So one of the things that's so sick, whether it's a Steez, so you mentioned the utility player, which would be an excellent one. If you're in an NRX and you're in like an MBR or you're in a P5, I'm going to talk about that for a minute. This cross weave build, the graphite, allows you to have a fast action rod that still bends. So you kind of get a little bit of both with it, right? I use an almost identical rod to what CJ used for most of my lipless, and that's the Dark Sleeper. So Story P5 Dark Sleeper, love this rod for fishing how you're talking about fishing. It's a true kind of medium heavy swim jig rod, but it works great for the lipless because it's got that nice soft tip, maybe a little softer than the Steez, but it's got a lot of power and a lot of backbone, and I can fish heavier line with it, pull fish out of cover, so that's a great one. If you guys are just using the smaller sizes, right, so if you're not going to mess with that 5/8 much and you're going to play more in like the 3/8, so the straight level vibe or the level vibe boost, the 3/8 half-ounce stuff, don't underestimate how good a jerkbait rod is for lipless. So jerkbait rods are perfect lipless rods if you're doing what we're talking about doing, where you're kind of getting it in, you're having to be a little snappy. Because remember, jerkbait rods are kind of combining a fast action rod and a soft action rod into one, right? So they're giving you enough give to keep them hooked on that treble hook, but they still have to be faster because they're designed for you to be jerking and twitching all day, so they need to recover really fast. So they end up being a great rod for a little lipless to get in and just rip it out of grass, and they're really responsive, but they still give enough. So the Orochi Jerkbait Special, a sick one as well. But if you bump up to that 5/8 or 3/4 ounce, you kind of have to go to that next level, like the Utility Player, Dark Sleeper, 893, something just a little bit beefier, I would say.
Yeah, it's always a balance. Like, you're still dealing with trebles.
Yep.
But if you're fishing around grass or other structure, you definitely need the backbone to horse it out of there.
Yeah.
But you're dealing with trebles. So
Right.
It requires a specific rod.
There's always a give and take, right? I mean, a super heavy would be like the best for ripping it out, but you're going to lose every fish.
Right.
They're all going to come off.
Yeah.
Right.
And what's nice too is those baits come with really good hooks.
Yes. So the good point, you've brought that up a couple times. Rate are good to go out of the package. Now, Griff brought up an interesting point earlier. Some of these baits will come with snaps, and some of these baits won't. Okay, so the Level Vibe Big, the BIG, comes with a snap. Okay, the regular Level Vibe doesn't, and the Level Vibe Boost doesn't, right? So they're going to rely on you to create your own connection. You're definitely going to want to put something there. I like split rings.
Yep.
I've talked about this a gazillion times. So even if I bought this one that comes with that snap, I'm putting a split ring on it. All right. If I'm going to be super lazy, I'll tie to that. But a lot of times when you're fishing around grass, you need a braid or you need a really heavy fluoro to give you enough strength to where you can rip it. Because if you try to rip like 12-pound fluoro, you're going to snap it.
Yep.
Right? So you get it in a big enough grass clump and you go to rip it, it's going to shatter. So you have to use some heavier line. I just prefer that solid split ring connection for me, just because I've had some bad snap experiences. But whatever you like to do, you're going to want to attach something there just to allow it to pivot, right, and make sure your line's not sitting on any sharp paint. But as far as the terminal goes, the hooks are good to go out of the box, which is nice as well.
Yeah,
on those.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right, guys. So that's a wrap. There is a deeper dive than I thought.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this would be a nice 5-minute conversation.
I think if you just had those 3 baits, you'd be pretty well off. I think you'd be pretty set.
Yeah, I think you could catch. I think you guys are going to catch a ton of fish if you implement these in. If you guys are already throwing lipless, these will be great ones to add. It's kind of a no-brainer. If you're not throwing lipless, this is a great place to start. You know, LV500 is always going to be the industry standard of lipless, but these are nice ones that are just different, right? So by adding them in, you're getting different sounds, different positions, different looks. Definitely worth a shot. So if you guys have questions on anything we covered, on how we're fishing them, any of the terminal, or whatever you want to ask, right? Drop it down below. I will definitely get an answer to you. CJ will leave links to everything we talked about, so if you want to look at any of it closer, you, of course, come into the store, or you can click on those links and check it out online. And guys, on behalf of myself and CJ and Griffin, everybody here at the Hookup Tackle, guys, thank you for giving us the time. Thank you for watching our videos. Thank you for your business, and we will see you again soon. Enjoy the lipless season. It's one of the funnest seasons, in my opinion. So have fun, you guys. Peace out.